Hello guys, welcome back to Anime Moments. Today is explanation of upcoming episode of Against the Gods based on novel. So let's start explanation. Everyone gathered within the Demon Imperial Hall was broadly knowledgeable as they were the top experts from all of Demon Illusory Realm. However, not one of them had seen profound skills being sealed in ice, and they were shocked stupefied. Some people even stood up in surprise and repeatedly checked to ensure that what they were seeing was not an illusion. Bang, bang, bang. Following Yunche's aggression, the ice-sealed storm shattered as though it were normal ice. Xiao Donglai was so shocked that he had lost any form of composure and stared blankly at the quickly approaching Yunche. As his arms shook, a long spear appeared in his hands, then swept up a huge whirlwind. With a loud roar, he shot the spear viciously at Yunche, and the figure of a mighty Pegasus, spreading its wings and howling, emerged at the tip of the spear. Rip! The long spear shot straight through Yunche's figure, but all it tore apart was an afterimage. Xiao Donglai was instantly stunned. Given that his senses and perception had been thoroughly trained by his wind profound skill, he still did not detect when Yunche had used his instantaneous movement. Luckily, his reaction speed was fast. He withdrew his profound energy at top speed, then guarded his entire body. Boom! As though an extremely heavy sledgehammer had been mercilessly smashed onto his back, Xiao Donglai's back instantly concaved deeply, and the profound energy that he had gathered to defend his body shook violently, almost completely dissipating. At this moment, he finally understood why Jiufeng Yu had been knocked out and bled from every orifice on his head in just one blow. If he had not guarded his body with all his profound energy, such a frightening blow would definitely severely injure him. Even more so, Jiufeng Yu, who did not bother to defend, had received such a blow directly to his chest. In the midst of the deafening noise, Xiao Donglai flew away like a bullet, spinning around several times in midair before he barely stabilized his body using wind profound energy and landed at the edges of the arena. As he landed, he staggered and directly half-knelt onto the ground. His face had become exceptionally pale. Following a gulping sound, he forcefully swallowed the blood that had already rushed to his throat. And before he had the chance to stand up, he heard the howling of the wind in front of him. As he raised his head, he saw Yunche's ice-cold look, which was not more than 30 meters away from him. Facing Yunche now, how would Xiao Donglai dare to have any more scorn and arrogance? He gritted his teeth, ignoring the internal injuries he suffered, and condensed his profound energy. He grabbed his long spear tightly, but before he could completely stand up, profound light flashed under his feet and a huge tree of frozen end sprouted from the ground, growing quickly, and within one breath of time, it had towered into the sky until it reached the top of the hall. Frozen End's fourth stage, Tree of Frozen End. The branches of ice and leaves of snow of the huge tree of Frozen End wrapped around Xiao Donglai densely, and he could only struggle for a short while before being completely sealed in ice. Even though he had quickly utilized all the profound energy within him, he could no longer move one bit. It was as though cold energy that came from an icy hell had entered his body as he felt all the blood in his body rapidly freezing over. Goodbye? The corners of Yunche's lips hooked up in his mutter, and he gradually opened his outstretched hands. Ping! The tree of Frozen End suddenly exploded and the skies were filled with ice crystals, which caused the temperature in the hall to drop drastically. Even those who sat at the corners of the hall shivered intensely due to the cold. Among the dreamlike ice crystals, the completely frozen Xiao Donglai flew out without struggling, just like a lifeless corpse, and even when he had landed onto the ground, he still did not move. The hall was now silent once again. The audience that was previously struck dumb by Yunche, who had crippled Jiufeng Yu with one blow, was stunned yet again. It could even be said that they had been shocked senseless. When he severely injured Jiufeng Yu in one move before, they could acknowledge it as Jiufeng Yu's carelessness in not preparing and defending, while also assuming that Yunche's specialty was strength. 99% of the audience believed that if they were to fight head-on, Yunche would never be Jiufeng Yu's match. After all, Jiufeng Yu was from the Guardian families that had a 10,000-year heritage. In terms of foundation and profound arts, Yunche could not possibly compare with him. However, Yunche's fight with Xiao Donglai was a true and honest confrontation. Furthermore, once Xiao Donglai had entered the arena, he had used the Xiao family's most dangerous after-image attack, but that was countered by Yunche's own after-image attack. The full-force storm attack that he had executed was sealed in ice by Yun-che. In his panic, he had used his weapon, but it was still easily defeated by Yun-che. Even the speed that the Xiao family boasted to be the fastest within the illusory demon realm was quickly obliterated by Yun-che. Not only was this round an honest confrontation, Xiao Donglai had used all the advantages he possessed, yet was still defeated by Yun-che, and it was a tragic defeat. Numerous people were shocked, numerous people were baffled, numerous people were dumbfounded, and even more people could not believe their eyes. In the Mu family seats, even Mu Feiyan had stood up, and he himself did not know when he had done so. Seeing Yun-che, who was walking leisurely back to the edge of the arena, his beard trembled intensely as he said in a daze, "This kid is unbelievable, unbelievable. What kind of profound art is he using? There's actually such a frightening ice profound art that I have actually never heard of in this world." Mu Yuqing exclaimed in shock. Mu Yubai shook his head. Our Mu family have always boasted that our ice profound skills are unrivaled in this world, but compared to this kid, just based on the fact that he could encase profound energy in ice, our family's profound skill already cannot be compared to his. TCH. Someone in the sky profound realm that can match a mid-stage overlord, such speed, such a movement skill, such an overbearing ice profound art, and he even cured. This kid simply has too many secrets on him. No. Even if it costs my life, I must make him my sworn brother. Big brother is actually so powerful. Xiao Yun had his mouth agape in shock. Husband, is he really our son? Mu Yuro grabbed Yun Qinghong's hand as her emotions went from nervousness to shock to being so agitated that she had nearly lost control and spoke incoherently. This child that heavens had returned to this couple gave them far too many surprises. She felt that she was still in a dream, and the deep relief and pride caused her tears to well up uncontrollably. Yes, he is our son. Yun Qinghong nodded strongly as his quivering eyes revealed a deep sense of emotion and pride. The various Yun family elders were all flushed, and even the three grand elders, Yun Jiang, Yun Shi, and Yun He, couldn't help but nod. The Yun family disciples who previously snorted surreptitiously and normally looked down on Yun-che in secret were now so ashamed that they wanted to hide their heads. Xiao Donglai was carried back to the Xiao family seats by the Xiao family members, and at this point, everyone from the Xiao family was staring at Yun-che. However, those were not looks of anger, but looks of shock and disbelief. Yun-che had completely overwhelmed Xiao Donglai in terms of speed and movement skills, which were what the Xiao family had always been the most proud of. They were so shocked that they could not even shout a phrase back in anger or retaliation. The members of the Jiufang family who were voicing out their discontent and unhappiness over Jiufang Yu's defeat had all shut up as well, no longer able to say that Jiufang Yu had only lost due to his carelessness. Jiufang Yu and Xiao Donglai's strength were around the same level, so since Yun-che had defeated Xiao Donglai in a mere 5 rounds of exchanges, even if Jiufang Yu had fought with his all, the result would have also been a huge loss under Yun-che's hands. They had completely predicted Yun-che's strength wrongly. No. It was just that Yun-che's strength had completely defied their logic. If one could defeat someone who was 1 level higher in the Tyrant Profound Realm, he would have had to be an unparalleled genius. The ultimate profound handle of the Yun family could, at its limits, allow them to release strength 2 Tyrant Profound levels higher than their own. There was a huge gap between the strength of each level of the Tyrant Profound Realm, and the massiveness of this gap was something that talent could not easily overcome, unlike in the Spirit, Earth, and Sky Profound realms. An early-stage overlord being on par with a mid-stage overlord was already like a legend that had been actualized by no more than 5 people throughout the entire history of the illusory demon realm. As for a throne being on par with an overlord, that had never been seen or heard before. Something like a person in the Sky Profound realm being on par with someone in the Tyrant Profound realm, and it was the middle levels of the Tyrant Profound realm, was something that had never occurred before in all of history. If it were not for them seeing it for themselves today, even if it were told that by the most respectable person in the world, they would never have believed it. But such a person was standing in front of them now. With a profound strength at only the 10th level of the Sky Profound realm, he had beaten Xiao Donglai, who was in the 4th level of the Tyrant Profound realm. Furthermore, it had only been 5 exchanges. No one could imagine just how Yun-Che could release such frightening strength when he was only in the sky profound realm. Such a bizarre leap in strength was something that could only be described as heaven-defying. At the very least, one must possess immeasurable talent to become capable of fighting across levels. Could one's talent truly be this great, to such an extent? Duke Huai's expression stiffened. Defeating Xiao Donglai head-on and severely injuring the defenseless Zhu Fangyu were two completely different concepts. His profound strength could not be faked, and his strength was made clear in everyone's eyes. At this point, even Duke Huai's heart was completely filled with shock. Hui Ran, who had always been looking down, uninterested, finally looked up and glanced at Yun-Che. He snorted, HMPH, seems a bit interesting now. This brat's strength is indeed a bit exaggerated. It seems like Kai Yang Yenwu might not necessarily be his match. The number 2 of the illusory demon 7 scions, Duke Yuan Q, commented with a smile as he narrowed his eyes. Behind him, Duke Huiyi looked sullen as he stared at Yun-Che for a while before laughing coldly. This Duke also hopes that Kai Yang Yenwu loses to him as well. If that happens, this Duke can personally cripple him. Oh. Duke Yuan Q turned his head around and said, speaking of which, this Yun-Che brat seemed to have spoiled your grand plans a month ago. This is indeed a great chance. This Duke originally thought that we wouldn't have to appear on stage, but it looks like this game has suddenly become very interesting. I hope that this brat won't be burnt into ashes by Kai Yang Yenwu's flames, otherwise, it would spoil your fun. Don't worry. Duke Huiyi laughed eerily. Falling into Kai Yang Yenwu's hands is probably not much more comfortable than falling into my hands. That woman is extremely vicious. Even though this Duke would lose the joy of doing it personally, I can at least save my energy and wouldn't have to dirty my hands. If nothing goes wrong, Chea's next opponent is probably the Kai Yang family's daughter, Mu Yuro softly said, her face revealing some worry. No need to worry. Yun Qinghong placed his hands on Mu Yuro's hands and consoled. Although the strength of the Kai Yang family lass is far superior to that of Jiufang Yu and Xiao Donglai, Jia has not used his full strength yet. Even now, he has not used his weapon. Dad, do you know what weapon Big Brother uses? I have never seen Big Brother use his weapon and always thought that he wasn't proficient in using them, Xiao Yun asked. Yun Qinghong shook his head, recalling the heavy whistling sound that came from when Yun-Che was in the practice room. He replied softly, it's not that your big brother is not proficient in weapons. If I haven't guessed wrongly, he probably specializes in some sort of heavy weapon. Heavy weapon? Xiao Yun stared widely. It is not because your big brother is careless that he has not utilized his weapon until now, it is probably because the weapon he specializes in is very taxing to use. Yun Qinghong looked at Yun-Che, who was on stage, and calmly said, it's obvious that he is considering the circumstances ahead and is trying to minimize his energy consumption. Naturally, only when he feels his opponent is strong enough to threaten him would he take out his weapon. At this point, a fiery red figure was now standing in front of Yun-Che. It was the figure of a gorgeous, tall young woman. She had scarlet hair and even her base-colored skin had a hidden tint of red. She was Kai Yang Yenwu of the Kai Yang family. When Kai Yang Yenwu went onto the stage, all the boys in the hall instantly cheered. Although her looks were considered pretty, they were not divine. However, she dressed wildly and seductively. Her top was a short, tight-fitting leather shirt and her bottom was a pair of short and tight high-waisted leather pants. The outline of her breasts, arms, stomach and thighs were completely revealed and many young men's eyes sparkled as they salivated upon seeing them. Kai Yang Yenwu was obviously very used to such attention and noises as she held her head high, acting noble like a cat and arrogant like a peacock. Being from a race of true dragons, the Kai Yang family had always possessed the nobility and arrogance of their bloodline. Among the 12 families, the Kai Yang family's strength was ranked third and only paled in comparison to the Helian and the Su family. As Kai Yang family's strongest within the young generation, Kai Yang Yenwu was even a female, and the only daughter of the patriarch Kai Yang Bailey. No matter her identity, race, or strength, she naturally had the rights to be arrogant. Even when facing Yun-Che, who had easily defeated Jiufang Yu and Xiao Donglai, her arrogance, or perhaps more accurately, insolence, did not lessen even one bit. Two useless men, simply lost our guardian family's face. Kaiyang Yenwu's scarlet eyebrows were upturned, and although she was muttering to herself, her voice was not soft. Jiufang Yu and Xiao Donglai could clearly hear what she had just said. She removed the scarlet whip from her waist and swung it, which caused sparks to fly and invoked a deafening "pah" sound. You are called Yunche. If you do not want to lose too repulsively, honestly take out your weapon. This princess does not want to be bothered with bullying an unarmed man. Every word Kaiyang Yenwu uttered was filled with deep arrogance, and Yunche could detect the aura of a true dragon from her body. The dragon was the king of all beasts, and no matter human or demon, under such an aura, it did not matter how strong someone was, they would instinctively feel a sense of fear. However, Yunche naturally would not, because in him was the bloodline of the primordial azure dragon. Simply comparing the dragon breath, the scorching sunfire dragon was not even fit to compare with the primordial azure dragon. Facing the arrogant Kaiyang Yenwu, Yunche did not take out his weapon. Instead, he folded his arms in front of his chest and leisurely said, I'm the opposite, I like to bully girls holding weapons while barehanded. He. Yunche's posture caused Kaiyang Yenwu to laugh. Her laughter was clear and ear-piercing. She swung her whip and said with contempt, Yunche, do you think that just by simply defeating two male trash, you can act so insolently in front of me, Kaiyang Yenwu? In my, Kaiyang Yenwu's, entire life, no one of the same level has ever been able to beat me. When you die miserably later, don't say that I didn't warn you. Yunche crooked his mouth and said, you're a lady and yet you're born so arrogant that you've barely looked at anyone without conceit. Looks like your family never disciplined you properly. Never mind, today, let me help your family discipline you a little. At least, next time when you talk to people, you'll be more reserved. Discipline me? In the entire illusory demon realm, there is not a man capable of disciplining me. Kaiyang Yenwu's eyes narrowed as she said, as for you, you dare speak in such a manner towards me. I shall make you kneel down and beg for forgiveness today. This Kaiyang last temper is really as the rumors say, Yun Qinghong plainly said. She is the sole daughter of Kaiyang Bailey and also the strongest from the current generation of the Kaiyang family. Within the entire demon imperial city, there is no one of the same age, male or female, who is her match. Furthermore, with the temperament of a teenage girl, her behaving superciliously was only a natural thing. With such temperament, she would suffer losses sooner or later, Yun Qinghong calmly said. After he spoke, he frowned slightly and sent a sound transmission to Yunche, Cheya, don't underestimate your opponent. Your opponent, Kaiyang Yenwu, possesses the bloodline of a true dragon and was thus innately born with a strong physique and the power of dragon flames. The whip in her hand is known as the Fiend Dragon Solar Whip. Although it looks simple, it is actually a tyrant profound artifact and one of the greatest artifacts the Kaiyang family possesses. Even without injecting profound energy into it, it can move mountains, crack boulders, and even fill the skies with dragon flame. You must be careful not to get hit by it. Yunche nodded slightly in reply to Yun Qinghong's sound transmission, and when he looked, Kaiyang Yenwu had already flown into the air. Her body ignited a deep, purple dragon flame which soared into the air and in an instant, completely covered the entire ceiling of the hall. It was as though a curtain of purple flames had been pulled down from the ceiling. Although Kaiyang Yenwu acted and spoke arrogantly, when she attacked, she already used nearly all her strength. It seemed that she didn't dare to act too carelessly and look down on Yunche, who had defeated Jiufang Yu and Xiao Donglai. Seeing how she attacked, members of the Kaiyang family heaved a sigh of relief. Even though Kaiyang Yenwu was usually very arrogant, she did indeed have the strength to be so. Since she had used her full strength, there was no reason why she would lose to Yunche. Furthermore, she still wielded the Fiend Dragon Solar Whip that even a high-level overlord would be worried about. Yunche, open your doggy eyes and let me show you the difference between us. Whoosh! When Kaiyang Yenwu swung the Fiend Dragon Solar Whip in her hand, numerous flames shot out, which turned into swift, purple-colored flame dragons. Along with the dragon flame that filled the sky, a whip rushed towards Yunche, with her figure followed swiftly behind the dragon flame. An extremely deep, purple flame was ignited on the entire Fiend Dragon Solar Whip. The air around the flame dragons distorted severely, and the tens of thousands of people behind Yunche all felt a scorching heat wave approaching them, which nearly burned their organs, causing them to scream in shock. Although they were so far away, the effects were still so obvious, it was not hard to imagine just how frightening the dragon flame was. Yunche's hair and shirt were swept up by the scorching heat waves, yet he did not retreat one step. Swinging his hands, his entire body shined with a blue glow as he released the frozen end divine arts with full strength. Crack! 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 The sound of the ice materializing was extremely ear-piercing, and the 20-odd flame dragons all froze over quickly when they were within 15 meters from Yunche. Following the spread of the blue glow, the solidifying of the ice spread at a frightening pace, turning each purple-colored flame dragon into blue-colored ice dragons. Damn! Even dragon flame can be frozen. Upon seeing this scene, Mu Yubai directly jumped up. If even he had such a reaction, one could only imagine the level of shock the other members of the Mu family were experiencing. This was also the first time Kai Yang Yenwu had experienced such a scene in her life. She was slightly stunned, and her expression changed faintly. With a shout, the dragon flame once again ignited and the figure of a scarlet dragon appeared prominently behind her. Then, among the dragon flame in the air, 3 of the flame dragons forcefully broke out of the ice seal and rushed straight at Yunche. Boom! The hole shook, as though 3 meteors had fallen from the sky. Flames soared upwards, and among the exploding flames, Yunche jumped to a great height. Just as he stabilized himself, a scarlet figure flashed in front of him, and the fiend dragon solar whip filled the sky with whip shadows. The whip shadows brought along scattering purple flames that covered Yunche as though it were pouring rain. Yunche focused his gaze and he used Star God's broken shadow to move instantly, causing all of the whip shadows to hit nothing but thin air. Yunche attacked with one hand, sending out a frozen lotus that instantly passed through the dense dragon flame and whip shadows, then exploded in front of Kai Yang Yenwu's chest. Ping! Kai Yang backflipped and lost balance, but she still forcefully swung the fiend dragon solar whip in her hands. The whip itself was 3 meters long, but at that instant, it suddenly grew to 30 meters long and lashed out viciously onto the body of a shocked Yunche. The whip in Kai Yang Yenwu's hands was the fiend dragon solar whip. It could even a mountain in one lash. The sound produced when the whip lashed onto Yunche was so deafening that everyone's hearts pounded violently. Yunche was also, without a doubt, sent flying by this lash. Chea! Mu Yuro stood up instantly and anxiously shouted. Regarding the Kai Yang family's fiendish dragon solar whip, she was very clear on how frightening a lash was. Yun Qinghong quickly held her hand as he gradually frowned. Seeing Yunche being sent flying by the lash, the entire hall cried with shock, and members of the Kai Yang family smiled slightly. Previously, when the scorching sun dragon flame was being largely encased in ice by Yunche, they were shocked. However, no matter how eerie his ice-profound skill was, this lash would cause him to at least lose half his life. During this competition, Yunche had indeed caused a small commotion, but now it was time for everything to end. However, just as their smiles appeared, their faces had become serious once more. Yunche, who had been sent flying by the lash, did not roll on the floor pathetically like they had expected. Instead, he spun in midair and landed casually. The lash landed on the right side of his back, and the clothing there was completely torn, revealing a foot-long red mark on his skin, which was more white and tender than a woman's. His hand stretched to his back and touched the red mark as he continuously hissed, "SSS. Oh. Oh wow. It's really painful." The previous cries of surprise instantly disappeared as everyone had been dumbfounded, especially the Kai Yang family, whose members stared with mouths agape, their chins about to hit the floor. Not only was the fiend dragon solar whip's name was well known within Demon Imperial City, it was also reputed in the whole illusory demon realm. An overlord wielding the fiend dragon solar whip could guide the power of the fiend dragon and the strength of the sun, and could easily sweep mountains flat, even break fine iron into pieces. If it were used to whip the body of a mid-stage overlord, even with the lightest strength, it would cause a deep bloody scar or break a large surface of bone and take half their life away. But on Yunche's body, there was only an extra red mark. On the red mark, not a single drop of blood was seen. Everyone who had heard the great name, Fiend Dragon Solar Whip, was thinking the same 5 words in their mind: how could this be possible? Was it possible that Yunche's body was even stiffer than 10,000-year-old fine iron? Or did Kaiyang Yenwu fail to use enough strength just now? This was perhaps the only explanation. They never would have thought that not only did Yunche's body have the dragon god's bloodline, he also had the protection of the strength of heaven and earth, and had been through a tempering thousands of times scarier than hell. Those 18 months on the primordial profound arc, even though 18 months were short to a strong, powerful profound practitioner, those 18 months of tempering for Yunche's body were still incomparable to thousands of years for ordinary profound practitioners. Within those 18 months, Yunche's profound strength had advanced by leaps and bounds, and his body was refined until he was almost to the extent of abnormal. At the moment, his profound strength was far from the realm of monarch, but even if his body withstood an all-out attack from an early-stage monarch, it would be impossible to take his life, and it would even be unknown whether or not he would be seriously injured from it. His healing ability was so strong that even late-stage monarchs would find it difficult to attain. Besides, this was only a tyrant profound weapon in the hands of a mid-stage overlord. It surprised him a little that this fiend dragon solar whip was able to leave a red mark on him. Of course, what he was surprised about was different than what everyone else was surprised about. "You little hussy! I have been merciful to you, but you dare to lash me. If today I don't lash you back, my last name will not be Yun." Yunche gritted his teeth, flew up, and initiated an attack on Kaiyang Yenwu. Dozens of frozen end lotuses bloomed in the air, spinning as they pounded toward Kaiyang Yenwu. As the master of the fiend dragon solar whip, Kaiyang Yenwu knew best about the power of the tyrant profound weapon in her hand. When she saw Yunche, who had merely complained that it hurt without bleeding a single drop after getting struck by the whip, it was the first time in her life that she felt so unsettled and worried. Usually, she would drag her father Kaiyang Bailey to fight and exchange pointers. This whip on Kaiyang Bailey's body was a similar red mark like that. His body, for it to be comparable to father's. That's impossible. Absolutely impossible. He was only about 20 years old, and he seemed to be younger than herself. And her own father was a monarch who could look down on the heavens. How could they be compared with each other? It must be because that lash wasn't solid enough out of hurry. That must be it. Kaiyang Yenwu raised her head up high, held tightly onto her fiend dragon solar whip, as flames rose from her entire body. Following her deep roar, red scales appeared clearly on the back of both of her hands and above her forehead. Even her hair grew out speedily. In a blink of an eye, it was 3 times longer than before, and danced freely in the rising dragon flames. The dragon aura around her, along with the flame aura, was completely doubled from before. At the same time, the flames on her body quickly spread. Within the time of one short breath, it radiated all over the range of the arena, and turned the arena a deep purple. It was as if they fell into a purple flame purgatory, and in this purgatory, hundreds of red flame dragons quickly formed and danced carelessly. This is the Kaiyang family's scorching sun domain. Kaiyang Yenwu is going to use all her strength. Someone shouted with surprise from the sidelines. "I have already completely mastered my scorching sun domain. You are not even a small throne, so it's impossible for you to use your domain arts to cancel out my domain. In this limited arena area, if you leave the domain, you will lose, but if you stay in it, you will die." Kaiyang Yenwu yelled as she laughed coldly while the scorching sun domain built up. Yunche's ice lotuses all melted before they could touch her body. Fire attribute domains were mostly attack-type domains, and the scorching sun domain was no exception. The high temperature within the domain alone was enough to melt profound iron, and the fire dragons dancing chaotically in the domain could directly take the enemy into the deep abyss of death. But forget about Kaiyang Yenwu, who was only a mid-stage overlord. Even if a high-level monarch who could look down upon all of illusory demon realm had cast this domain, it couldn't hurt a single hair on Yunche's head. Yunche stood in the same spot, silently watching Kaiyang Yenwu waste her energy. He reached out his palm, and a blue light suddenly flashed in the center of his palm. Tree of Frozen End. In the center of the arena, which was also the center of Scorching Sun domain, a large, sturdy, and strong tree of Frozen End rose from the ground, growing at an incredible speed within the dark purple flame domain. A severe frozen aura also followed as the tree of Frozen End grew and spread. Even though it was growing in a world of flames and high temperature, it insolently pressured the high temperature beneath itself, forcefully freezing the fire and the dancing dragons. It even abruptly tore open a large hole in the center of the scorching sun domain. What? The Kaiyang family's patriarch Kaiyang Bailey stood up immediately as he stared at that ice crystal tree in the middle of the scorching sun domain with an expression full of shock. That ice crystal was clearly releasing an aura of the sky profound realm, but the thickness was no less than that of a mid-stage overlord. Its profound energy aura was almost the same as the scorching domain. But even though they were even, it was standing arrogantly in the scorching sun domain. The only explanation was that the level of this ice attribute profound art was far stronger than their Kaiyang clan's dragon flame. This is unbelievable. Mu Yubai widened his eyes, and even his voice was trembling. What kind of profound art is this? This strong ice attribute profound art, I felt that its level isn't lower than the Demon Emperor clan's Golden Crow flame. Why haven't I ever heard of this before? This Yunche, what background does he have? He only used one profound skill and completely dissolved Kaiyang Yenwu's scorching sun domain. Many of the audience lost control and yelled in surprise. Even though they were in the scorching sun domain, what Kaiyang Yenwu felt was a wave of piercing cold. That large tree of frozen end was standing right in the sea of flames just like that, without any sign of melting. On the contrary, it was slowly starting to swallow up the scorching sun domain. Her pupils shrank continuously. Then, she suddenly gritted her teeth, shouted, and swung the fiend dragon solar whip, abruptly whipping it towards Yunche. It was clear that her scorching sun dragon flames were losing miserably in front of Yunche's frozen end divine arts, so if she wanted to beat Yunche now, she could only rely on the fiend dragon solar whip in her hand. She swung her wrist, made a slight movement, and instantly brought a whole sky of red whip shadows. Yunche had experienced the power of the whip just now, so of course he wouldn't dare let himself get hit by it. Whipping his body was one thing, but if he wasn't cautious and it whipped on his face, then it would be no joke. If Yunche had his heavy sword in his hand when facing these 10,000 whip shadows, he would only have needed to defend it by placing his sword horizontally without even needing to open his eyes, but with his bare hands, he naturally couldn't be as careless. He immediately retreated backwards, and moved quickly under the shrouding of the whip shadows. After images swept one after another, Star God's broken shadow was used in coordination with extreme mirage lightning, and Kaiyang Yenwu's whip shadows blotted out the sky. But after continuous thousands of whip shadows, none touched his hair at all, and the crowd offstage were all stunned seeing this. His profound art and movement skills are all incredibly strong. Yun Qinghong couldn't help but be deeply impressed. Yunche's master must be remarkable. Indeed. Mu Yuro's hand was still on the location of her heart, but there was no nervous expression on her face, only surprise, joy, and pride. She knew that it was already impossible for Yunche to lose this battle. Flame Dragon's Fury. Maintaining the scorching sun domain while also attacking with all her strength, caused Kaiyang Yenwu to already be out of breath with flushed red cheeks. On the other hand, even though Yunche had been dodging this whole time, he was calm and didn't seem to be tired at all. Kaiyang Yenwu gritted her teeth angrily, and the silhouette of a dragon above her body flashed. The sky was overrun with the shadows of whips overlapping each other, which then transformed into a 33-meter-long furious flame dragon that angrily crashed towards Yunche. Boom! The flame was more than 33 meters high, and the incredibly rock-hard profound jade floor was actually cracked with a dark deep scar. Yunche flashed with speed into the air and dodged this attack, but following this, he felt the surrounding scorching sun domain suddenly riot. He raised his head, then saw the entire scorching sun domain completely collapse in an instant. All the purple flames and flame dragons within the domain came towards him crazily. Chea, be careful! Mu Yuro's body tensed, as she yelled out of nervousness. This woman actually plays dirty. Yunche scoffed in disdain. His arms opened, and the blue light on his body flickered. The area surrounding him up to 33 meters away immediately became a frost-blue world of ice. As soon as any of the purple flames and flame dragons approached, they were immediately frozen. Not a single lick of flame could touch his body. Just as he was supporting the frozen end divine arts, the Fiend Dragon Solar Whip came from one of the corners of the surrounding sea of flame and instantly crossed the 33-meter distance. The tip of the whip was like a poisonous snake sticking out its tongue, as it aimed straight for Yunche's right eye. Yunche had already experienced the Fiend Dragon Solar Whip's extension, so he was prepared for it long ago. However, once noticing where the whip was attacking, he tightened his eyebrows, and fury started burning in his heart. Originally, he thought this woman was only arrogant, he didn't think that her heart would be so vicious. This time Yunche didn't dodge. He reached out his palms with lightning speed and directly grabbed on the Fiend Dragon Solar Whip that was lashing out to him. Seeing Yunche's actions, Kaiyang Yenwu stuttered, and then started laughing coldly. "It's your own death wish." Pa! A loud shocking sound. The Fiend Dragon Solar Whip hit right in the center of Yunche's palm, and under everyone's shocked gazes, he just grabbed onto it. In the next instant, the Fiend Dragon Solar Whip suddenly burned with purple flames, and it immediately spread onto Yunche's entire arm. Before Kaiyang Yenwu had even gotten the chance to laugh proudly, the purple flame on Yunche's arm suddenly extinguished. It didn't matter how much profound energy she tried to instill, it wasn't able to burn again. Yunche grabbed onto the other end of the Fiend Dragon Solar Whip, then forcefully wrapped and jerked on his end. With his strength so great, how could Kaiyang Yenwu defend? On top of that, she had already exhausted a large amount of her profound energy. Under this strength that she couldn't defend against, she lost hold of the Fiend Dragon Solar Whip. It made a red half-arc in the air, got grabbed by Yunche into his hands, and he immediately whipped it down. Having lost her weapon, Kaiyang Yenwu was suddenly at a loss. When the Fiend Dragon Solar Whip came towards her in the air, she screamed in surprise, and tried to dodge backwards with all her strength. The Fiend Dragon Solar Whip missed, but she didn't have the chance to take a breath before a current of cold air suddenly came from underneath her feet, causing her entire body to stiffen. Immediately after, another tree of frozen end started growing speedily, its ice crystal leaves and branches spreading and trapping her within. At this moment, Yunche swung out the whip that was in his hands again. It went through the layers of ice crystal leaves and branches with extreme precision, and severely whipped her bottom that was wrapped tightly by her fire-red leather pants, producing a crisp, loud, PAH sound. "This whip is for when you whipped me before," Yunche said viciously as he reeled the whip back. The sound of the crisp whipping resounded in the entire hall, followed by Kaiyang Yenwu's scream. The hall, which was originally noisy, immediately became quiet. Everyone was completely stunned. Especially the young generation's elites in Demon Imperial City, their eyes widened so much their eyeballs almost popped out. Kaiyang Yenwu, who never put any man in her eyes, the most arrogant Kaiyang princess in the entire Demon Imperial City, was in this Demon Imperial Hall, with everyone watching, being whipped on the butt by someone. And the sound of the whip was so loud. Yunche naturally wouldn't use too much strength, so he only whipped off her protective profound energy to hurt her a little, but the pants weren't even ripped from the whip. Kaiyang Yenwu's bottom felt hot, spicy pain, but even if it hurt 10 times more, it couldn't be compared to 1/10 of a thousandth of the humiliation she was feeling in her heart. From when she was a child to when she grew up, Kaiyang Yenwu was held in the palms of the entire family. She was admired by every man and women. No matter where she went, she was a proud peacock, bearing countless men's ashamed gazes of inferiority as well as gazes of reverence, but today, a man who was holding her whip, whipped her butt in front of everyone. "Yunche, you bass." Kaiyang Yenwu didn't even finish yelling when Yunche whipped again. PAH, as it whipped on the other half of her butt. "This whip is for when you wanted to viciously destroy my eye before." Yunche's hand swung, and dashingly pulled back the whip. Even though the spiritual consciousness and intelligence of the whip made it so it was a bit restless in his own hands, when he wielded it, using it seemed to be pretty smooth. "Yunche, I'm going to kill you." This type of humiliation made Kaiyang Yenwu scream viciously. Her body violently started to struggle in the restraining tree of frozen end, but when the dragon flame managed to light up, it was immediately extinguished. Meanwhile, the tree of frozen end's leaves and branches were quickly spreading this whole time, becoming more dense. No matter how much she struggled, she couldn't get out of it at all. Yunche swung the whip in his hand, looked at her out of the corner of his eyes, and said, "You can surrender now." K. Kill me if you have what it takes. Even if I die, I will not surrender to a bastard like you. Kaiyang Yenwu's face was burning red, her chest almost exploded with anger, and she was still struggling all she could. Her eyes were staring at Yunche viciously, and it seemed like she wished she could burn him to ashes with her gaze. Oh, very well. I admire your personality. Yunche nodded, smiling. If you say so, then, no surrendering later, okay tilde. Amidst soft laughter, Yunche leisurely swung up the whip. Another PAH of a whip hit Kaiyang Yenwu's bottom, and this whip made a moderate rip in her short leather pants. Yunche. There'll be a day when I'll tear you to pieces. Kaiyang Yenwu was like an enraged female leopard as she roared at the top of her lungs. Yunche pretended to not hear it, and whipped again all cheerfully. Don't surrender. No surrendering, okay tilde. This lash finally made Kaiyang Yenwu drop a tear. She clearly felt that her pants that tightly wrapped on her but had started to rip. I don't know when you'll be able to tear me to pieces. Yunche was playing with the whip as he indecently smiled and said, but what I am sure of is, a few more of these lashes and your clothes will be all ripped to pieces. At that time, everyone would be able to see your Kaiyang princess's body. What do you say? How much do you think they will thank me? Oh, right. You said you'll never surrender, then please, never surrender. After saying that, Yunche's wrist moved, and another whip swung over. A loud, crisp, PAH sound made another rip in the other half of her leather pants. You. I will kill you. I will definitely kill you. No matter how stubborn, how arrogant Kaiyang Yenwu was, at this moment, her voice obviously carried a hint of a crying tone. She looked at Yunche with 70% anger and 20% killing intent, and 10% obvious begging. Enough. With a deep voice that resounded with anger, a fiery red figure suddenly flew from the Kaiyang family seats and instantly came to Kaiyang Yenwu's side. This person was also in red clothing and had fiery red hair. It was obviously the Kaiyang patriarch, who was also Kaiyang Yenwu's father, Kaiyang Bailey. His daughter was humiliated with everyone watching. Even if he had been 10 times as well-mannered, he simply couldn't endure it any longer. Kaiyang Bailey's palm waved, and the large tree of frozen end that sealed Kaiyang Yenwu immediately vaporized and disappeared. Kaiyang Yenwu, whose body was frozen stiff, fell on Kaiyang Bailey's body. Her nose wrinkled, and she finally found a place for her to vent all of her anger, humiliation, and frustration. Father. Kill him for me. I want to tear him into pieces. I want to. Silence. Kaiyang Bailey yelled angrily. Do you think it's not humiliating enough? Kaiyang Yenwu was usually rarely scolded by Kaiyang Bailey, and she also knew that she humiliated her clan today. Her eyes immediately became red and she stopped making any sounds. When she looked at Yunche, her eyes were still filled with the expression of bloodlust. Her reputation that she had built up all her life was all thoroughly thrown away because of Yunche today. Kaiyang Bailey's face was extremely unsightly, but the reason Kaiyang Yenwu lost to Yunche was because she wasn't as good as him. With everyone watching, he couldn't even be mad. He turned to Yunche, reached out his palm with a stiff expression and said, hand it over. Even a fool would know Kaiyang Bailey was asking for the Fiend Dragon Solar Whip that Yunche had snatched from Kaiyang Yenwu's hands, but Yunche's expression was filled with confusion as he replied, hand it over. Hand what over? Kaiyang Bailey's brows sunk and his eyes glinted with a dangerous light. Why? Could it be that you are harboring the delusion that you can seize my clan's solar whip? Oh, you're talking about this whip. It was now that Yunche looked up in sudden realization. He tossed the Fiend Dragon Solar Whip over to Kaiyang Bailey with a casual flick of his hand. This whip's not bad, especially when it's used to whip someone's buttocks. The sound it makes is very crisp and satisfying indeed. The vast majority of the people in the Great Hall burst out into laughter. With a single sentence from Yunche, one of the Kaiyang family's 3 ultimate weapons was reduced to a tool used to whip buttocks. Kaiyang Yenwu was already furious with embarrassment, and once she heard these words, her fury and embarrassment rose to new heights. If not for the fact that she had been whipped by Yunche to the point where she was scared stiff, she wouldn't even have been able to restrain herself and have it out with him. You? Yunche pretended as if he did not even notice Kai Yang Yenwu's murderous gaze and looked like he was minding his own business before he continued, even though this whip isn't bad, I would never ever have the courage to seize it. Recently, I have been perusing the annals of the 10,000-year history of this illusory demon realm, and within these records, I seem to remember that there was a mention that the fiend dragon solar whip was gifted to the Kai Yang family by the third demon emperor. So it seems that the Demon Emperor clan has truly held the Kai Yang family in high regard all this time. HMPH. Kai Yang Bailey kept the Fiend Dragon Solar Whip and said coldly, the Demon Emperor clan has always held our Kai Yang family in the highest regard, and the debt of gratitude that we owe to them is as heavy as mountains. Oh! Yunche exclaimed loudly, since Patriarch Kai Yang knows that the Demon Emperor clan has always held the Kai Yang family in the highest regard and that the Kai Yang family owes a great deal to the Demon Emperor clan, it only naturally follows that the Kai Yang family would be deeply grateful, loyal, and devoted towards the Demon Emperor clan. Also, the annals of illusory demon realm clearly illustrates the rise and development of the Kai Yang family, and pardon this junior for saying something displeasing to the ear. But if not for the original Demon Emperor and several of the great guardian families using their entire strength to assist your Kai Yang clan, your clan would have perished at the hands of the Morkue clan 10,000 years ago. Not only was your clan rescued by the Demon Emperor, he even led the Kai Yang family and conquered everything under heaven with you by his side. Because of that, your family became a guardian family which ruled over the heavens and radiated might and prestige. For the past 10,000 years, your Kai Yang family has belonged the highest echelons of the illusory demon realm, and they even bequeathed unto you the Fiend Dragon Solar Whip, a great weapon known throughout the realm. This great favor shown to the Kai Yang family by the Demon Emperor clan, even 10,000 lifetimes would not be enough to repay it. Yunche exclaimed with fervor, if there is ever a day that the seed of disloyalty is birthed in your Kai Yang family, that you forget your ancestors and your loyalty to become ungrateful and disloyal, that will surely provoke a universal disdain of the entire realm for your clan. Indeed, it is a contemptible act that would not be washed clean even in 10,000 lifetimes, an act that cannot be tolerated by heaven and earth. Oh, of course, after enjoying the blessings from the Demon Emperor for the past 10,000 years, coupled with the fact that your family is one of the most outstanding guardian families, it's definitely impossible for your clan to perform this kind of act that would shame your ancestors. But I was merely recalling the grand history of your Kai Yang family all of a sudden, so I reminisced for a while. Oh! Patriarch Kai Yang, why does your face suddenly look so bad? Could it be that this junior has said something wrong? Kai Yang Bailey's expression was indeed ugly to the extreme. Because the entire Demon Imperial City knew the true intentions of Duke Huai. When the Kai Yang family appeared at the East Wing, they too had made their intentions clear. Yunche's words were undoubtedly a fierce rebuke directed towards the Kai Yang family, but under the eyes of all the heroes of the realm, he couldn't muster a single response to this resounding rebuke. The blue veins on his arm stood out clearly as he coldly eyed Yunche. He said in a deep voice, the affairs of my Kai Yang clan are none of your business. You are not yet worthy to idly talk about us. HMPH. As he finished speaking, Kai Yang Bailey pulled Kai Yang Yenwu along and flew back to his seat. His daughter was disgraced for all to see, so as the Kai Yang family's patriarch, and even more importantly, as Kai Yang Yenwu's father, he should have greatly rebuked Yunche, or at the very least given him a stern warning and a few fierce words. However, he had instead grabbed Kai Yang Yenwu and left, as he was unwilling to exchange any further words with Yunche. It was clear that this hidden scolding of Yunche was extremely hard for Kai Yang Yenwu to bear. Ungrateful and disloyal, forgetting your ancestors and your loyalty, the universal disdain of the entire realm, a contemptible act that would not be washed clean even in 10,000 lifetimes, an act that cannot be tolerated by heaven or earth, every single word used was a poisonous needle that pierced his very soul. Once Kai Yang Bailey had left, the West Wing immediately exploded into thunderous applause and acclamation, 3 consecutive victories. It was the first time the West Wing had 3 consecutive victories, and this was after they had suffered humiliating defeat after humiliating defeat. And it was 3 consecutive victories created solely by the last man standing, a turn of events that no one could have foreseen. Yunche, that was a beautiful win. This is practically a miracle. He actually won again. Just where did this Yunche pop out from? How come I've never heard of his name before? It doesn't matter what he was in the past, just based on the fact that he consecutively beat Jiufeng Yu, Xiao Donglai and Kai Yang Yanwu. From this day onwards, his name will shake the heavens. Is his profound strength truly only at the sky profound realm? This is simply too unbelievable. To all who were present, Yunche's 3 consecutive victories was a success that was more than sufficient to shake the entire illusory demon realm. Because he did not beat just any random side character, he had defeated those who represented the pinnacle of strength among the young generation of the entire illusory demon realm. The foster son that Yun Qinghong has taken in, he is simply incredible, simply way too incredible. Su Xiangnan exclaimed repeatedly in shock. Not only did he beat 3 people consecutively, he did so while sustaining basically no injuries. Moreover, it looks like he did not even use his full strength. Such a heaven-blessed genius, yet his name was unknown before now. He used such an incomparably tyrannical profound art, yet no one has ever heard of it. This child is definitely, absolutely extraordinary. For a sky profound realm practitioner to be so strong, this is indeed the first time I have seen it in my entire life. Su family's great elder also exclaimed, and he followed up with a low sigh and a shake of his head, but his personality is simply too wild and unrestrained. He reprimanded Duke Huai, heavily injured Jiufeng Yu and Xiao Donglai, and he even humiliated Kai Yang Yanwu, then subtly scolded the entire Kai Yang clan for the whole world to see. Such genius, but such lack of restraint. To flagrantly and publicly offend all of these people that even the little demon empress would hesitate to have a falling out with, while winning 3 consecutive victories and heavily damaging their prestige. I am only afraid that this young genius who is completely unrestrained and offensive will meet an early end. What Big Brother has just said is exactly what I am worried about. Su Xiangnan said as he nodded his head. Yunche miraculously won 3 consecutive victories and caused his opponents to suffer miserable defeats, causing the West Wing, which had prepared to have their dignity trampled, to raise their heads once more. Su Xiangnan was in complete awe of Yunche, and Yunche also naturally moved his heart, which appreciated talent and understood gratitude. Thus, he became worried about the possible situation that Yunche might soon face, because it was as the great elder had said, even though Yunche was brilliant and dazzling in this grand ceremony, he had fiercely offended one incredible person after the other, and he had even gone as far as to offend an entire family. Su Xiangnan glanced at Yun Qinghong and became hesitant to speak the words he was about to say. The little demon empress expression had been cold and calm the entire time, as if it was encased in ice. It was only when she looked at Yunche that a small and faint change occurred on her face. At the very least, her initial desire to kill Yunche had lessened. And the weakening of her killing intent was because he had displayed a strength that had shocked all who were present, while his words clearly expressed his desire to protect and be loyal to the Demon Emperor clan. Who's next? Yunche stood in the center of the arena, staring directly at the East Wing. Every single word was filled with a deep arrogance. No one in the entire Great Hall still mocked or despised Yunche as they had when he had first been introduced. Those who had mocked him without restraint were presently filled with embarrassment. Currently, there was only respect left in those gazes directed towards him, and his haughty words caused the blood of those seated in the West Wing to surge, as he left them with an uninhibited and extreme feeling of exultation after their complete and crushing defeat. This was especially so for the disciples of the Yun family. They had originally regarded Yunche as an outsider and completely rejected this person who had suddenly become the patriarch's foster son. But at this time, what rejection would still be left towards Yunche? Their entire beings were filled with admiration and respect as the feeling of shared prestige became unbearably intense. As for those seated in the East Wing, their expressions had naturally become extremely ugly, especially those young disciples, as rage and envy were clearly written on their faces. What is this Yunche so arrogant about? Does he think that just because he beat Kai Yang Yanwu, he is unparalleled under heaven? His arrogance is about to come to an end. The 3 who have yet to battle on our side are the remaining 3 of the illusory demon's 7 scions. And any one of them could abuse him to the point where his own mother wouldn't recognize him. HMPH. Just let him be smug for a while. He offended Duke Huai and offended the Kai Yang, Xiao, and Jiufeng families. His status is merely that of a wild punk from outside of Demon Imperial City. Whether he will still be breathing 6 hours after this ceremony is a matter that has yet to be confirmed. Bloody hell. I wish that Duke Huiran would come out now and smash his mouth to pieces with a single punch. However, that is not a likely thing, because with Duke Huiran's strength, he would not even want to trade blows with such an opponent. And with the presence of Duke Huiyi and Duke Yuan Xiao, Duke Huiran won't even have the opportunity to show off his skills. HMPH. Whatever it is, there is definitely no possibility that we will lose. The only thing that grinds my gears is that we allowed this punk to have the honor of winning 3 consecutive times. However, the more he shows off, the worse the consequences will be. I reckon that whether it is Duke Huiyi or Duke Yuan Xiao who steps on the stage, neither will hold back, and even if he were beaten half to death, he would still have been let off lightly. So let him be arrogant. Duke Huai's expression was still completely placid, but a strange light had appeared in his eyes. When Yun Che had beaten both Jiufang Yu and Xiao Donglai, even though he had been stunned, he had not truly taken Yun Che seriously. However, he had just beaten Kai Yang Yenwu without even expending too much of his strength. But what caused him the most concern were the words that he had said to Kai Yang Bailey. From this moment on, he had no choice but to completely re-evaluate Yun Che. He was unable to find either hide or hair regarding Yun Che's origins despite his own great power. He'd also been sorely mistaken about Yun Che's strength. Moreover, he had immediately been accepted as the foster son of that Yun Qinghong after he had entered the Yun family. The previous scheme that was targeted at the Yun family and the Underheaven family was also completely unraveled by him, to the point where it had been laid bare for all to see. After he had comprehensively analyzed this person, Duke Huai was suddenly seized by a thought: this Yun Che just might be a completely unforeseen and unknowable variable. His logic-defying talent and strength, that demeanor and sharpness that far surpassed his age, all caused Duke Huai to feel a clear sense of danger. Duke Huai's brows faintly sunk and the killing intent he felt towards Yun Che instantly intensified by tens of times. He lowered his head and sent a profound energy sound transmission to Duke Huiyi. Kill him. Duke Huiyi had already been prepared to set out for battle when he suddenly heard Duke Huai's sound transmission. His brows jumped and his mouth faintly curved into a cruel smile. He looked in Duke Huai's direction and gently nodded his head, after which, he bounded into the air to land in front of Yun Che. His face was full of smiles as he looked at Yun Che, and that gaze was filled with an unconcealed cruelty. Duke Huiyi. It's Duke Huai's palace's young Duke Huiyi. I never thought that he would actually force Duke Huiyi to personally come out. It really doesn't make me feel good. But at least this competition has finally come to an end. Yun Che won 3 consecutive victories, but it seems like he hardly broke a sweat. Moreover, he hasn't even used his weapon yet. Do you think that Yun Che might have a possibility of beating Duke Huiyi? Are you joking? This is the one who is ranked number 3 among the illusory demon 7 scions that we are talking about, Duke Huiyi of Duke Huai Palace. The thickness of the royal blood that Duke Huai Palace possesses is second only to the Demon Emperor clan. And all the dukes in Duke Huai's palace have a strong bloodline that is second only to the Demon Emperor. And the profound art that they cultivate is the one recognized to be inferior only to the Golden Crow's record of the Burning World, the Fallen Flame Devil art. A practitioner of this art who is at the 6th level of the Tyrant Profound Realm has power that is equivalent to a level 7 Tyrant Profound Realm practitioner from the 12 families. Even though it could be said that Yun Che easily beat Kai Yang Yenwu, he also had to fight nearly 100 rounds and at one point, he was nearly forced out of the arena by her. Now that Duke Huai has made his move, he won't even last 3 rounds. So how can there be any possibility that he will lose to Yun Che? That's right. Do not compare any disciple of the 12 families to a duke from Duke Huai Palace. Yun Che is indeed strong to the point of absurdity, but there is no way he can be Duke Huiyi's match. At most, he might be able to force Duke Huiyi to use his full strength. There was much discussion inside the hall. The unsightly looks on everyone's faces in the East Wing seats were gradually alleviated when they saw Duke Huiyi enter the arena. They all revealed a cold smile. They believed that Yun Che's previous public attention would cause Duke Huiyi to treat him harshly, and there was also the possibility him killing Yun Che. As for Duke Huiyi losing to Yun Che, it was definitely impossible. The cries from all those seated in the West Wing suddenly went cold, as every single person seated there displayed varying degrees of anxiety on their face. Especially those seniors, once they thought of Duke Huiyi's temperament, their brows tightly knitted together. You have done pretty well. Honestly, this Duke actually severely underestimated your strength. 1 month ago, when I saw you at the Yun family household, I had thought that you were merely a little grasshopper who was beneath my notice. I really did not think that you would actually be able to force this Duke to personally take the stage. I guess that you are somewhat adequate enough for privilege of making this Duke take you seriously. Duke Huiyi had a bland smile on his face as he said that, but Yun Che could perceive an incomparably clear killing intent from his eyes. This kind of clear killing intent told Yun Che that in the upcoming battle, Duke Huiyi would definitely try to deal a killing blow to him. Yun Che also smiled. Duke Huiyi, it's better if you boast less. This kind of boasting, in my entire life, even if I have not heard it 1,000 times, I have at least heard it 800 times. But in the end, every single one of them had slapped their own face without a single exception. And let me tell you, slapping your own face is very painful, you know. Episode 101 is end here. Next episode coming tomorrow. Thanks for watching.